Let's move on to fisheries because Gary Simpson probably knows more about fish than anybody else in this country, especially about South Africa's fish.
Just a thought.
Nemo. That's what I've been doing for the last 30 years of my life. At first I wanted to become a millionaire, and I decided, well, fishing's the way I was going to do it, and I went and became a multi-millionaire, and hell of a thing. Realized that wasn't what I really wanted, and then felt bad about what I actually did to achieve that. And my thing is not just about looking after resources, it's also about having been born here in Cork Bay and hanging out with the fishing communities and growing up like that and seeing the pain and suffering in those homes and wanting to do something to make it better. So I come from coastal communities to make their lives better, and I come from wanting to use what we have sustainably and enjoy life after that. Damn hard task. Before industrialization came along, everyone went and did their thing and it was sustainable, and you couldn't really wipe it out because it is a mighty potent resource. No matter how hard they've given it a go, somehow we still have some. And in capitalism came into that industrialization, but just an example is in Velddrift, which is a little west coast town. In the 40s, they found out that they could extract oil from pilchards, and they had this little 1 ton an hour silex plant, and it all started off small, and eventually they had the 10 ton an hour reduction plant and the 60 ton an hour reduction plant, and then expanding the fishing fleet and starting to suck in all this fish. Talking about the communities that fished, they were making so much money that their wives were getting clothes and cars and things imported from the rest of the world in the 40s. The fishermen, the very fishermen themselves, not just the capitalists. And geez, that looks like a damn good idea.
Yeah.
And then capitalism stepped in seriously, and the money men realized we can make a lot of money here, and we just suppress the workers. We provide the machinery, and we've got to put a regulation mechanism in with government. And for instance, the lobsters, there was a free for all, but all of a sudden, I think it was about 1940, just before the apartheid government came in, still the colonials, they did the thing called the production quota, where it didn't matter what you caught, but only so much could be produced each year and exported out the country, and there could only be so many producers. So, and that's how they started to lock down. And we'll get to West Coast rock lobster, which is really a problem now. And these coastal community guys slowly had their normal rights taken away from them, and they couldn't exercise them unless they worked for the factory or for the capitalist. So our first collapse of a fishery was back on the West Coast in 1949. And it was, what happened was that they just obliterated the resource. Already then, they brought in the technologies that were too effective, and they wiped it out. So they wiped out, I'm not a scientist, but the reproductive biomass of the stock. And it's never ever since recovered to any level as good as it was then. Then they walked away from it because it wasn't making money, but there were other fisheries, let's go have a look at the hack, and geez, this lobster's really cooking now, so let's wipe that out.
Same as Cannery Road.
It's precisely the Cannery Row, California situation. So these guys it's the same companies. Oceana is, I think, 97 years old now. They were there, Gaggins and the boys. It's fascinating history when you haven't been there, but I almost feel like I lived there in a previous time set. And these very same, and the families and the Rothschilds were there. They funded the Marine Products' first facility in those years. And these big capital families moved in here and took control of things, and nothing has changed to date. Okay. So just know that what you got today, you got I&J, you've got Oceana. Oceana is the biggest, and now turning 4.3 billion rand a year. That was the last turnover, just now. Followed then after that I&J, about 2.5 billion. And then you've got, I would say, Sea Harvest, which is also in the 2 to 2.5, the hake, particularly hake, and Iron Jays, particularly the hake fishery. And then you've got old Gaston and the Lusitania brothers and the Portuguese community in South Africa. And then you've got Pioneer Fishing. They probably the most responsible for the decimation of our fish stocks. I'll go into that. And Viking Fishing and Marine Products. These are the boys. And today I've been part of making that new allocation system, and it's beautiful on paper, but the application is never what was said on the paper and what should filter through into the system, and it's contrived and manipulated. Yeah, and this brings me now today. So, for instance, in the hake, which is our biggest fishery, or our most wealthy fishery, our biggest fishery is the pilchards and the anchovies. But the hake fishery probably employs about 15,000 people a year, and it's really ruled by sea harvest, Iron Jay and Oceanus growing in it, and Viking Fishing and Gaston. Or let me put it this way. Sea harvest got about 40,000 tonne a year, Iron Jay's got about 40,000 tonne a year, and then with this empowerment thing, Lusitania, Viking, all these guys, they got between 8 and 12,000 tonne a year through fronted rights out to black people, and then they catch it for them. And in the market, when you go across there, you'll find the cheapest, they take to make a fish finger, the bits and pieces. That's your lowest grade of hake. And when you go across into Europe and you go to the supermarket and you buy yourself a box of fish fingers, you're going to be paying the equivalent of 120 Rand a kilo. So, not much of that money ever seems to get back here. And the empowerment guy, he comes along and they give him 1,000 tonne hake quota. Ideally, to be in that game, you need 2,500 tonnes to have your fish, your loaf of bread in the shop each day, so the customers come and you can keep turnover. So nobody gets 2,500 tonnes, but they give out a lot of little 1,000 tonners. So then the capitalists actually sit in a room, they hate one another, but they agree on one thing, that we sure as hell not paying these guys anything more than 3 Rand a kilo. Despite the fact that the lowest grade is going for 120 Rand a kilo.
That doesn't, but I mean...
So it's all contrived and controlled. And then so I deal with value chains, which...
So, sorry, you haven't finished that statement. Maybe the beer took your head.
It did.
Contrived and controlled.
So you said they all sit in a room?
Oh yes, and so the Competition Commission says you can't do X, Y, Z. So, and they do all hate one another. I know Gaston, and I know Nico, and I know all these guys, and I've been with them on the tours when I was a capitalist. I know the beat. But I see them fighting with one another, and they hate one another. But money is more important. So they will go and have a Bosparat and declare certain levels. And so we, all the big companies, of what we're going to pay the new quota holders. So we will sit here, we own all the big companies, and so we're not going to pay more than 3 Rand. So Gaston, we know you like climbing out the box because you're so damn greedy, but if you do, we're all coming for you. And it's a gentleman's agreement, and they walk away, and then empowerment remains down there and the whole lot. And the transition doesn't happen where... So only big is great. You have to have a big company to be successful, but meanwhile, you could have what I was trying to build in this London area, a 2,500 tonne hake company that employs people, that was paying 10% of the turnover, and really, I started making all this money and I felt rather guilty. What the hell am I doing with all this money? It's all too easy. So how do I give it back into the system? And that's why they didn't like me. So it's contrived and controlled, the market.
He's done all
Yeah, there's the
Yeah.